Well, how you doing out there? Dave Hill coming at you with lesson number 39. We've really come a long way in these lessons. I know you've been practicing hard and you've been learning a lot, and there's a lot of information that you're going to want to go back and review again. So don't feel like you've learned everything and that there aren't other things that you can go back and review your notes and review some of your downloads of your information. Please go back and make a list of everything you've worked on, and maybe you might find that there's some things that you touched on that you can't even remember studying because you covered so much new stuff in other lessons. Okay, so what I was doing there in that little setup to our lesson here was something that I would probably do a little bit more sparingly if I was going to just improvise freely. But what it pretty much came down to is I was playing what are called double stops. Okay, I was using a lot of double stops. Now the double stops we refer to the use of two intervals played together to create a harmonic interval, almost like a partial chord, if you will. Okay, notice that when I was playing a lot of the progression itself has a double stop in it, the little riff that I was playing. That's a double stop riff right there, and that's, in this case, double stops of diatonic thirds. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about using double stops to bolster or to add to our guitar soloing technique. Okay, so what does it mean, double stops? Double stops are just two intervals played together to form a harmonic interval. Okay, a melodic interval are two notes played separately. A melodic interval could just be any two notes played, or that's a melodic interval, and they have a relationship between the lower note and the upper note. This is a melodic interval of a third. Okay, this is a melodic double stop. This is rather a double stop of a third. Okay, they occur at the same time. So in the case of my progression, I had a progression that went from A7 to kind of like a F Lydian sort of sound, or G mixed Lydian sound, which is essentially G7 or C major. So I'm going from A7, which is the key of D, right, to the key of C, and that's going to be now double stops back and forth between D major and C major. And that was kind of the basis of my riff I came up with. So you can see my hands are moving back and forth between these shapes that outline the key of D, mostly on the top couple strings, because that's kind of where they stand out the most. I mean, I could have played double stops in the bottom here, but they get a little bit dark and kind of muddy on the bottom. In fact, I'm going to turn off my overdrive pedal there. And you'll hear in there I'm a little cleaner, right? Okay, so take a look at the board here, and you'll see that I wrote out sets of double stops on the top two strings. Let's take a look at the top row of double stops. And in this case, these double stops refer to the key of C. Okay? So what I mean by that is that the notes, if you looked at the note on the B string there, the relationship of the notes, and I'm kind of intending them to go across the board in three sections. So you have essentially this note, or the scale C major, going up the top, up the B string. And the note underneath it that you can see is the third below, in this case starting from A, in the key of C. So when you put them together, they form the diatonic thirds in the key of C. These notes all belong in the key of C. I'm playing, in this case, an A and a C. In this case, a B and a D. In this case, a C and an E, a D and an F, an E and a G, an F and an A G and a B, and finally an A and a C. So I'm back where I started. Okay, so listen to it against the A string. Now listen to how they feel against the A string. Makes it sound like an A minor double stop phrase, because they fit perfectly against A, because A is one of the notes in the key of A, key of C, so it sounds like A natural minor. Now, however, if I put, let's say, if I were able to hold a G against these notes, you'd hear all these notes fitting against G, but now the effect is one of a different mode. It's creating G mixolydian. It's a little harder to do every one of these, but you can hear how they sound, okay? So what's great about double stops is they can be used over any chords in the key that you happen to be playing over, and they create the sound of the key and a thicker version of the scale, if you will, as you use them. So I find them to be useful in situations where, either the music sort of stylistically feels suitable for a double stop kind of approach. Maybe it's melodic, or it's got a certain kind of melodic feel that the double stops will really blend nicely over, or perhaps maybe like a ballad or something like that, or a nice maybe country song or something like that. You often hear thirds in country music, all kinds of music really. But another situation I find that very useful is a situation where maybe I'm only playing with the bass player and a drummer, and so the bass is holding down the roots, but they're not really providing any color in terms of the harmony. So the double stops that I'm use on top of a bass player will start to feel fuller, and yet I'm the only harmonic instrument. Okay, so I used them a lot when I used to play a lot of trio gigs, or if I still do to this day, I'll employ more double stops in addition to soloing and single notes. Okay, so what you wanted to get good at is practicing using, not just going up and down in one order like that, but skipping around up and down the string. So you might actually play them in thirds in this case. Right, I'm literally doing like a third exercise as I'm playing the thirds in double stops, okay? So let's listen to a progression I came up with. There's just a couple of chords strung together. The key is C here, so listen to how they sound good on both of these chords. Show you something. Okay, now listen to that against that A minor chord. So here, there are some considerations when you're using these double stops. Okay, now my progression here, just something I put together real quick, is just F over G to C major 7. Okay, just a simple diatonic progression in C. Okay, F over G again, and I went to A minor. Now, what I was trying to show you is that although the double stops fit generally over all the chords, there are implications that the double stops give you in terms of chords, right? You can simply see when I play the F, or rather the C and the A, I'm essentially playing part of an F chord right here. Right? You can see that that's part of the F triad in the key of C. So naturally, these two notes sound good against the F chord itself. They also sound pretty good against A minor because these two notes are also in A minor, right? But let's say I was in the key of, let's say I was on the E minor chord in the key of C, and I'm holding that chord and I'm playing these two notes. See how that doesn't sound very good? Because these notes, although they're in the key of C, they don't sound strong against the E minor chord at that moment. Okay, so you still have to use your ear a little bit when you're playing to make sure that you're landing on the double stops on whatever the chord you might be on that give you a little bit more of a stable resolution. Okay, so generally the chords of the one chord, which are the one chord, the 3 chord, and the 6 chord in the key, in any diatonic key, are the only chords you really have to worry about. The 2, the 4, the 5, and the 7 chords in the diatonic scale are pretty much, all the double stops will sound pretty good against them, but the 1 chord, the 3, and the 6, you might have some issues with resolution points. So listen to how I'm going to use these double stops now, and I'm going to find the resolution points on the C major and the A minor that make my double stops sound like they resolve. Okay? Here we go. 3, 4. There's the 5 chord. I can do almost anything. But on the 1 chord, I have to be careful. I have to go back to these notes. I'll try to make a mistake so you can hear why it wouldn't sound good. Right there. See? These notes, while they're in the key of C, right? I'm holding an F and an A. But the chord is C major at that very moment, so these two notes against C major don't sound good because it's the 4th degree of the scale and the 6th degree. The 6th doesn't really sound bad, but when you put the 4th against it, the F, and I'm holding this chord, it just doesn't work as well. It's not the strongest notes against that chord, so you really have to try to resolve the double stops at the right time. Okay? So now, we're working on them along the B and the G strings there. The G string here and the B string. Now, like I said, you also want to use them on some other sets of strings, so you might want to go up to the B and the E string and now use double stops as well. So check it out. You'll have the same sort of relationship. You'll have a scale going up on the B string, in this case C again. And then of course, going up on the E string. And really you could have started your double stops in reality with the C and the open E right there. That would have been acceptable. But the first one I wrote out was actually the D and the F. And then I beamed them together because you might get confused if you saw these two notes together and you might have gone and played that interval. And I'm trying to show you these are the two that fit together here. Okay? So in this case we have okay, and of course you could go up a little higher, come back down. Okay, and once again you can use that A to kind of give you and keep you dialed into the chord sound. Okay, so you combine that with what you just learned on the B and the G string. Right, and you really can start to get around the neck now. I'm sure you've heard double stops used in melodic situations all the time. One of the very popular tunes that you hear, you know, a lot of times on wedding bands and various gigs I've played is this melody right here. Tell me if you don't recognize this. Everybody knows that Van Morrison tune, right? Brown Eyed Girl. Well, the reason that is so recognizable at that point is because these double stops, in this case thirds again, create a melody, and you're harmonizing a melody when you go. Right, you're just putting notes of the chord underneath it, and it fills it out, and it just immediately catches the listener's ear. It sounds good. Okay, so let's do it. Let's practice moving these double stops around. Let's go up the B and the G string here. Or actually, let's start the new ones that we just learned. Like this, and go on with our progression here. Okay, here we go. 2, 3, 4. Go up one higher. Now it's going to sound weird there because it lined up that way. Back to here. Now I'm going to go on the B and the G, and I'm going to do them in thirds. Notice I'm skipping every other one and jumping over. I skipped over the strings. Back into a melody, and it sounds really nice to have that blended together. So this is only scratching the surface of everything you can do with double stops. I'm just giving you some basic primer on diatonic double stops. Okay, and this is, of course, is only the key of C, right? You do want to work out these double stop shapes going through different keys. You can essentially, what you have to get good at doing is seeing your scale patterns now instead of in positions in like this. As you go up the neck, you're going to have to see them along groups of strings as you go up this way instead of staying in position. So that's kind of a skill that you'll want to work on, playing along groups of strings. Okay, so that's it for lesson 39. Let's work on our double stops over this little simple progression and just see if you can get some of those things happening in your own playing, and we'll bring those up in some other lessons down the road. All right, talk to you later. Dave Hill signing off.